Subscribe to Books on Toast or I will write a very bad cookery book.
Hello everyone, I'm sorry my voice is so hoarse. Last night I went to the Penguin party and those guys really know how to throw one. So this is what's happened. But we are here, JLF Day 2 with Reni-Eddo-Lodge.
Thanks for having me.
Very excited about her being here, and she's written this amazing book called Why I Am No Longer Talking to White People About Race, which we're going to talk about extensively today. And Reni, first of all, welcome. Welcome to India, welcome to Jaipur.
Thank you for
Are you
having
having a good time?
Yeah, it's my first time in India, and so it's been a whirlwind so far. It always is when I'm travelling for the book. Because I don't have like loads of time in the country, I feel like I get my understanding of the country from the people I interact with, and everyone's been really great.
We're very happy to have you here, and let's talk about your book.
Okay.
So when you wrote the blog post and you wrote the book, did you see it becoming the phenomenon that it has become, or it was all unexpected?
I don't think any writer really anticipates their work being a success when they are starting it, you know. You just focus on the work. And for me, that blog post that I wrote now 5 years ago was really, it was a little letter to myself essentially that I happened to post on my blog, in which I was trying to understand and explain to myself and, you know, to the extent of people around me who read my blog that, okay, this was something that I could not do anymore for really my own mental health. You know, I couldn't talk to white people about racism in particular anymore. Not white people, not stop talking to white people about everything, just racism. You know, talk to them about holidays, pets, you know, anything else. EastEnders, just not racism, because I felt being disbelieved and being denied a reality, you know, it's not good for anyone, is it? And so, you know, that was something that I did really for myself, and it caught fire when I decided to, you know, focus on the same issues for a book. Again, you know, for me, publication day was the end in my head. I was like, well, it's published now. I've said what I needed to say, and I didn't quite anticipate people taking it on as something they wanted to, you know, look to as a tool book, as a guide, as something that was speaking for them. And so, you know, it's a delight as a writer. You just want to be understood. You want people to resonate with your words. And I actually think that, like, anticipating success when you're starting is like a recipe for failure. And so I try never to do that.
Okay. Your book is the second book that I've read this year, which introduced me to, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I didn't really think about it actually, which introduced me to the role of Great Britain in slavery and its inherent racist culture. The first one was S.E. Edugyan's Washington Black. Have you read that?
I've got a copy of it on my bookshelf.
Oh,
but yet to read. My to-read pile is this high. I get sent books all the time, so I'm just, what a terrible thing to complain about. Like, oh no, I enjoy reading and books arrive. But no, it's on my bookshelf, and I'm going to be cracking into it.
So you should, because it talks about a slave in the Caribbean named Washington Black, and that plantation is owned by a British merchant. And it talks about how when slavery was abolished in 1833, what happened to the titular characters. So it's a great book, and again, it forced me to think about these things that I hadn't yet thought about. And I just felt like it was a no-brainer, really, like, you know, colonialism, and which is why in India, of course, has seen its share of British colonialism. And when I was reading your book, I felt this sort of kinship. So you've traveled with this book a lot. Did you get a similar sentiment from all the countries that you visited that had to face some sort of colonialism, that had a colonial history?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that the places that I've travelled to with the book have all been touched by British or more broadly European colonialism in some way. So, you know, I was just recently in Brazil, I've been to Australia, New Zealand, I'm off to Canada soon, and the book is also coming out in various translated European languages, so I'm going to be touring Europe later this year. And yeah, I think that, you know, the European colonial project in which part of it, wittingly or unwittingly, advanced some ideas of white supremacy around the world.
Absolutely.
Has had like really long-lasting effects on how we understand each other and how we understand ourselves. And so, you know, I was saying a bit earlier on my panel that when I initially started, you know, the project of this book, I thought it was on reflection, it was parochial, it was domestic, it was about Britain, but it's about so much more, I think. You know, I'm not saying that the book is universal by any means. It really does speak to my subjective experience. But the fact that some of the political theory that I discuss in there is so many people from around the world can deeply resonate with it is, you know, it continues to be mind-blowing to me. The vast reach of white supremacy as an ideology around the world is something that many of us continue to reckon with, continue to push back on.
It's interesting because India also feels like it has inherited this same belief system, which bases so much on skin color. So we are besieged by fairness cream ads, and the belief that's held is that if you're dark, your skin is dark, you will not get married. That's what we tell our daughters all the time, over and over again. And this was the stuff that we grew up with, you know, also. And then we had to grow up and then we had to unlearn it, because first we had to identify that it was wrong. How do you tell kids these days to unlearn something like this? And how do we also build better relations between non-white races? Because I feel like even that is something that's lacking.
I think it's interesting that you say, you know, what we tell our daughters about, you know, essentially refer to colorism, because it's part of the reason why I'm not just an anti-racist, I'm a feminist. I'd call myself a black feminist, because I think that, like, racism and white supremacy has a particular effect on those of us who are not white, who grow up as women in this world, in that it tries to make us hate ourselves, hate our skin tones, you know. Skin bleaching and lightening creams are also, you know, I'm British Nigerian, they're endemic, you can find them across Africa, you can find them across Asia, and
it's nuts.
You know, comparing ourselves to like a white European ideal that was never an ideal, that was never for us in the first place, is something that I think as, you know, women of colour, we always have to be resisting. You know, how do we, I mean, I don't have a daughter, but, you know, how do we talk to the next generation of women? You know, I have a 12-year-old sister. Well, first it's about interrogating our own values around that. And this is why I think that, you know, the ideology can be internalized. You know, we grow up surrounded by it. We have to challenge our own ideals about it. And then when we're challenging our own ideals, it's a less of a complicated thing to model the right behavior for the younger generation, I would say. Yeah. You had another question. It was about
forgot.
Like, I guess.
Yes.
Interperson of color relations.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's, for me, it's about having a shared aim, and I think that, you know, I grew up in inner city London amongst. Actually in an environment that wasn't majority white, but it was super like mixed, super multicultural, and lots of like recent immigrant families from all over the place. And one thing that we had in common was that we were all poor. And another thing that we had, that was very obvious to me at the time. Another thing that was common, that we all had in common, which wasn't obvious to me at the time, but now is obvious to me as an adult, is that, you know, we were all dealing with we were all marginalised by the culture in different ways, and if we have a shared aim, then we can recognise and respect our differences in light of that shared aim. But that being said, I think it's really important to understand that, like, the foundation of white supremacy as an ideology is anti-blackness, and it's a hatred, you know, of, you know, the aesthetics of people from the African continent, and I think amongst all communities of people of colour, this sort of like imperative that you must not be dark. You mustn't be dark, and dark is the absolute bottom of that. And I think those of us who, you know, are from the African continent or in the diaspora like myself, you know, we feel that keenly, and we can feel it from other communities of colour as well. And so for those who, you know, like Indian people, like Indian friends at home, you know, they're challenged as anti-racists who face racism, but also can see anti-blackness in their own communities, is to keep challenging that, because otherwise that's going to continue to create a sense of distrust, ultimately, between those of us who should be working together. And we have a common cause, and we do have shared aims.
Yeah, I agree. How much has your life changed? Tell me, are you tired of having this conversation, or are you happy to have it?
I think I'm happy to have it. It really depends the type of conversation. You know, it is my job now to talk about this book.
Yes.
So obviously, like, my life's changed hugely. Like, I could barely afford to pay the rent before this book came out. Now I don't have any problem paying the rent. You know, like, I used to be able to walk around my area in East London with relative anonymity, and now I can't, you know, meet with a friend in a local coffee shop without people interrupting and talk to me about the book.
That's amazing.
My life's changed, my financial position's changed. I have a level of visibility, not just in my little corner of East London, but in certain areas, you know, in different areas around the world. I think, like, being book famous is kind of interesting because it's like a small, dedicated core people who are very, like, you know, feel very strongly about the book.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not Justin Bieber by any means.
Yeah.
And I can still get the tube, you know. But every now and then I get stared at on the tube. That's really the level that I'm at. So it's changed, like, individually for me in a huge way. But also, like, outside of, like, my individual circumstances, I can also see how the conversations around me are changing. I think because of the way that the book has emboldened and helped people to have some difficult conversations about racism, about racist behaviour, you know, in their workplaces, in their families and stuff. And so, to me, that's hugely heartening and probably a good, like, side effect and a preferred side effect to some of the slight inconveniences to my life. You know, yeah, it's changed a lot. And ultimately, what I really want to see is, like, more writing from, I think in particular, British writers of colour, but more broadly, more writing from around the world, not just America, because so much anti-racist writing is coming from there.
Yes.
Like, from all around the world, it's really challenging some of that dominant ideology of racism and white supremacy, because culture has a huge part to play in changing the world.
Is there any good fiction that you'd recommend? Because all the fiction that I have read has been American, which tackled this issue, but any good fiction that you'd like to recommend to our readers?
Oh, I'm really loving, like, black writers, you know, from Africa and also from, like, Trinidad, Jamaica. Some of the best and amazing fiction work that, like, deals with these ideas. So there's a writer actually at this festival who I'm dying to meet, and I can't.
Akoiki Amazing. No.
She wrote this book called Kintu. That book is incredible.
Okay.
An amazing sort of like discussion about not just the African country in particular, but more broadly about colonialism. I love a book called Augustown by a writer named Kei Miller. I think it's one of my favourite fiction books of all time.
Wow.
And he writes,
That's
again,
a very strong recommendation.
It is a strong recommendation. I'm always going on about it. He writes amazingly, again, about the issues, and I love fiction for writing about these types of issues, because I think with non-fiction sometimes you feel a bit bashed over the head, and that's coming from a non-fiction writer.
You said it, not me.
What can I can say it because I'm a non-fiction writer, so it's fine.
Do you have a work of fiction in you?
Well, I often talk to people about, like, my love of fiction, but I don't know if I'm personally capable of, like, creating a whole new world in my head. So I think I'm just going to keep enjoying reading fiction for now.
What do you do for fun, Reni?
What do I do for fun?
Yes.
I have a pet rabbit at home. Yes, and so, like, that really, like, that takes up 70%. Well, not that. She takes up 70% of my
What's
leisure
her name?
time. Her name is Saffron.
Oh.
Yes. She's named after a fragrant spice. And
Which you get here a lot.
yes. And so, you know, I spend a lot of time with my pet, and I go off and do interesting cultural things in London, like going to galleries. I love eating out. Yeah, I'm a big fan
I saw
of
that.
food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read an interview where you were eating Mexican food in Melbourne.
Yes,
Melbourne does have really good food. I want to just one last question, which is reading your book made me. So I love Downton Abbey. And reading your book made me feel really guilty about loving Downton
I'm not trying to tell you your faves are problematic. You can still enjoy Downton Abbey.
I know, but it made me realize that there is a surprising lack of black representation in British shows, especially period dramas. Do you think that's changing? The latest Doctor Who companion. Are you a Doctor Who fan?
Well, yeah, I'm a Doctor Who fan. Yeah, I'm a Doctor Who fan.
I love Doctor Who because I love science fiction, and the new companion is black. She's black and a lesbian, which I loved. So do you think that's changing, and how much does representation matter?
It's actually interesting. I interviewed, you know the actor Riz Ahmed?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I interviewed him.
Such are boys.
Yeah, we love him.
Yeah.
I interviewed him for a podcast project, and obviously being an actor and working in the UK and the US, he had some really interesting insights. And he essentially said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that, you know, Britain has this like idea of itself that it exports to the rest of the world, like Downton Abbey, and all these films about various queens. That you know doesn't actually tally up with the experience of Brits, especially in the cities. And he said, compared to like the US has this idea of itself, multicultural, you know, melting pot or salad bowl, whatever you want to call it. You know, and so we get all these exports of these American TV programs where like you've got the black best friend and the this and the that, but he said that doesn't tally up with the experience over there, which is actually a very segregated one. You know? And so I thought that was a really sort of interesting insight to, you know, how culture is moving forward.
Okay, we have run out of time, so I have to end this conversation, or I would have spoken to you forever.
Well, it's been great. It's been great to chat.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. We are Books on Toast. Please share this video. Please comment and let us know what you thought of this video. And subscribe to our channel, because if you subscribe, then we'll keep bringing great people like Reni to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.